our legal group. We heard that this group of people was getting into so much trouble with their daily operations that we had to bring a lawyer back again. But we also brought an insurance guy and, also brought Tom Deary. So that's a good partnership up here on stage. And, racing is implanted in our next guest's DNA. The trailer race, that's all I got to say. And your mom is still going strong and still a wonderful lady and treats her customers right.
93 years old.
Starting at the short track level at my favorite hometown asphalt track, Rockford Speedway, he has forgotten more about the racing business than most of us will hope to learn in a lifetime. From the World Racing Group, Mr. Tom Deary, thank you so much.
He's here all week.
Yes. It's really great that we're on at 4 o'clock because that's when everybody's, well, wait a minute. Your head's been nodding all day. This half of the room over here is frozen. Right, guys? We're going to put a little heat into the room here. It is cold
over there.
So that's it's great to be here. I am very fortunate to have the privilege to be involved with the most ass-kicking, wildest, coolest racing on the planet, which is dirt racing with the World of Outlaws. We've got a great team that we traipse all across this country, get to go to a lot of venues. So it's a great place to be. And yes, as you said, my mom is 93 years old, still goes to work every morning. When I was home visiting her over Thanksgiving, she got up before I did and was at work because I couldn't find her. I didn't. Where did Mom go? Because I stayed at her house, and she was at work the day after Thanksgiving. So that's tough genes to be having in your family. But it's great to be here, and we'll have fun here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Jeff, stay off your phone. I'm going to be watching.
Our next guest is so brilliant, she was needed on 2 different panels this year. Let's welcome back Lori Eberhardt.
Thank you. It's great to be back with these delightful gentlemen. And we'll talk a little bit more about legal updates. And I've been in the legal industry my whole entire life. I was general counsel at Speedway Motorsports for 12 years. And in the last 3 years I was there, moved into an operational role, and have really dealt with every legal issue that's come across the pike as far as speedways and sanctioning bodies are concerned. So I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Dennis.
And one size never fits all when it comes to risk management, I was once told. Our next guest is an expert at minimizing his client's exposure to risk, from sports insurance specialists and another proud marketing partner of the Racetrack Business Conference, Mr. Jeff Ladd.
Thank you, Dennis. I'd like to say thanks to Dennis and Tim and this whole Racetrack Business Conference. It's a privilege to be part of this. I think I've been involved with every one of them in one way. They're here or now sponsoring, and I think anytime you can share ideas and network, it's a big advantage for everybody. So especially when you're bringing in all different kinds of aspects of motorsports. So a little bit about me. I've been in the motorsports insurance business for 27 years. I've handled all sizes of facilities. Large super speedways down to everyday short track racing. And the same goes for teams, sanctioning bodies. We do a lot of work with them. And I can tell you things have changed a lot over 27 years. And where things are going into the future, I think, are pretty exciting. And that's our goal, is to be here and take this thing into the future and keep motorsports strong as it's ever been. So thank you.
So we've got some... Boy, I train them good, and then I'm telling you, I want to jump right over them. All right. So here's the way we're going to do it, gang. I'm going to throw the first question out to Tom, but I want to get your point of view on this from each of your unique perspectives. So, Tom, from a leadership point of view, especially a group the size of the World Racing Group. I mean, big group, big events, lots of people at these events. How do you prepare for the worst case scenario in our terror-prone society?
I wish I would have studied for this. You know, it's a great question, and whether it's a big event or whether it's just a small event or whether it's a club event, it's something that really has become a forefront of what we do, where we're inviting public to our facility, whether they're a participant or a spectator. And terror can take so many different approaches. It could be weather. It could be something happening within the community. It could be something that's happening at your facility, both with spectators as well as on the track. And it's having a plan, which could be as simple as 5 or 6 things written on a piece of paper, or a binder full of sections and pieces and all the elements that you need for that event. It's having that plan in place. And sometimes the most simplest part of that plan is, who's the person that's going to speak or address, or how are we going to deal with this situation? Not that many years ago, if a thunderstorm was rolling in towards our facility, we didn't think much about it other than, hurry up, let's get this show done. Let's get it done so we can move on. Well, now there's so many other things that we have to consider. Lightning strikes, are they close enough? And those are the pieces that make what we do now so much more susceptible. Did I say that word right? I don't know what even word that is. But that makes us in the limelight of, if something happens and we didn't react the right way.
Susceptible.
That's the word. Thank you. I learned a new word today, too, that we need to get to, and I'm going to need Lori to explain it to me, because it was de-risk. I don't know what de-risk is, but I want to learn more about it as we move on today. So anyway, that's where I think we are today in that terror discussion.
Jeff.
From the insurance side, from the terrorism standpoint, I'm sure if you own a venue, run a venue, manage a venue, when you get your insurance quote, there's an option on there to either take terrorism or refuse terrorism. The bigger events, as an insurance person, you're not going to say, yes, absolutely do that, or no, don't do it. But I think all events should take it. The charge isn't nothing compared to what it used to be. And then it comes down to, if there is an act of terrorism, it comes down to the government having to declare it an act of terrorism. So, not to get into big details, but we all know what happened in Las Vegas, at a concert. And to this date, I don't think they've been able to find that terrorism had any responsibility for that. I'm sure that the promoters of that event probably purchased terrorism coverage. They would probably love for the government to find that there was terrorism somewhere. So that's just an example of what can happen in the insurance standpoint.
Lori?
It's a really good question, and I think given our geopolitical situation, it's become more top of mind. And I think in a way that you can de-risk having any kind of liability from any kind of terrorism is to have a plan. To Tom's point, the insurance companies have a really good handle on risks there. They employ, if you don't know, a room full of mathematicians to come up and giving probabilities of when these events are going to happen. It's a job. So they know when these things are going to come about, but have a plan, whether it's a security risk to the people that you have in your grandstands, to a weather risk, to a participant risk. There's a piece of debris going into your pit area. There's a piece of debris that goes into your grandstands. These things should have been thought about ahead of time. A lot of times I tell my clients to have a 10-step emergency list. These are the 10 things that you do when something happens, the unthinkable happens. And you just follow your plan, and you can solve these things. I'll tell you a really interesting story really quick, if I may. When I was at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and this is not classified information, but it was right when, you guys remember who Eric Rudolph is, the bomber at the Olympics in Atlanta? Remember he was hiding in the Appalachian Hills in North Carolina? Well, we had our race that fall, and all of a sudden we get a PBX. This is the time we had fax machines. We get a special, secret, confidential fax from the FBI saying FBI has information that Eric Rudolph is going to be at your race this weekend. Great. What do you do? What do? You talk to the FBI, you talk to the sheriff's department, you talk to the police, you talk to every single law enforcement people that you can have around. And at this point, you know, you follow the FBI and the federal authorities, and now we have Homeland Security that can take you through the steps and can help provide you and shield you from any kind of liability. But you need to be reasonable in the circumstances. But those things happen, and I would advise you to work with your security, your local authorities, your insurance provider, and always go back to the plan that you've thought about ahead of time, because when it happens, you're going to need to react quickly.
All right, Jeff, the next topic I'm aiming straight at you, but then we're going to go down the panel and see what everyone else has to say about it. I go to more and more races. I see more and more drones out there flying around, and some of them just spectators doing their thing. Others are part of the race coverage. What do track owners and operators need to be worried about when it comes to drone usage from your insurance point of view?
Well, drones are not covered unless endorsed onto the policy. And also something to point out is drone use can be recreational or it can be commercial. So if you have a facility and you're flying a drone and you're taking photos, you're taking videos, it's commercial, especially if you're going to sell those, use those for promotion or something like that. If it's recreational and the guy's just out there flying it, you know, a few feet, that's a different deal. But I don't think that a lot of people realize that drones are not covered unless specifically endorsed on there. And when we had our call, that was one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because some of these events obviously are pretty large, and somebody knows what they're doing. It's not all that expensive to get a drone up in the air to get footage and photos and that type of stuff. So from the insurance standpoint, that's my angle on it.
And I had a full head of hair until a few years ago at Knoxville with a drone. You're not going to buy that. Lori.
In addition to making sure if you're having drones on your property or you're allowing your customers to bring them in and having the insurance coverage, you may want to either restrict them from coming in your property. No, people can't bring in drones because you don't want to accept the liability. If your broadcast partner wants to bring a drone into your property, make sure that it's covered on your broadcast partner's insurance, that they're taking that risk, that you don't have the risk as the facility owner, and knowing where it is. I think it's only foreseeable that drones are going to be in the society more and more. I'm actually getting one for my son, my 17-year-old son, for Christmas. I'm getting a build-it-your-own drone. I may come to regret that, but that's what he wants. But be thinking about how the drones are coming into your property, whether you want to let them in or not, and how they're going to be used.
Tom?
They're really a cool toy, and a lot of people that have fancy stuff like to get fancy toys. And I was just looking at Dave Vodden here, thinking of all the guys that go to his facility with their fancy toys. I'll bet every one of them's got a drone in the trunk, and they're going to be out there trying to fly them. So from a facility standpoint, keep the toys at home. Tell your son to keep his in the backyard until he runs it into the tree or into your Lexus, and then it's all over.
Okay, so this next question I'm going to throw out at you, Lori. This is not really going to be much of a round-robin question, but it's something that I know is a concern of yours from a legal standpoint and something that you're doing good work with as well. So when I throw that one out, I'm also going to open things up to the audience after Lori's question. So if you have a question in mind for this panel, again, remembering how expensive legal help is, and also insurance checkups never hurt. If you have a question, please raise your hand now so we can find you at the microphone. And Lori, this question is one that came up during our conference call. We're seeing a lot of takeovers in this business now, a lot of former mom and pop companies that for whatever reason the next generation doesn't want to run it, and we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions and takeovers in the industry. What pitfalls should track owners or company owners be aware of in this arena?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it comes up when you see buying and selling of companies, and there's a lot of consolidation that's going in our industry, and it often happens in conversation of hey, I know somebody that wants to buy your business, or and there's some kind of financial consideration that's involved. If you get involved in these conversations with somebody, you need to be aware that you may be broaching some kind of securities rules. There's a lot of securities rules about buying and selling securities and stocks and bonds and interest in companies. And what I want you to think about is just your antenna should go up a little bit when you're looking at buying and selling any part of your company and looking to get some really good legal advice to make sure that you're not violating any kind of federal rules. Because these are casual conversations that happen, and they come up with a friend of a friend who knows somebody, but just be aware that there are some really stringent securities rules that can affect your ability to freely transfer those pieces of your companies.
Hi, Mark Basso, Audubon Country Club. We have a minor question about minors. So we have a lot of members, kids that are now progressing up from karting into racing in our Spec Miata series, open wheel. In Illinois, a minor can't waive their rights. So obviously we have the parents sign the waiver, but the concern is obviously something happens and then the kid turns 18 and they were hurt and they might have long-term care or something, and then they would want to turn around and go after us and everyone else involved. So is there any other suggestions about additional insulation or any other suggestions?
I think from a broad perspective, each different state has their own rule regarding minor waivers. In some jurisdictions, in some states, they're enforceable, and some they're not. Illinois happens to be one that they're not. Michigan is one that they're not either if you're in a for-profit organization. I would advise always getting a minor waiver. You can't have the minor sign, but have the guardian or the parent-guardian sign. I always advise to have both, if you can get them there, both parent and guardian. You don't want dad and mom and dad aren't talking to each other, and then you have an issue with that. Even if it's not enforceable, it gives you evidence in your lawsuit that there is an assumption of the risk, that they knew what they were doing and they consented, and the release itself may not be enforceable, but it's going to give you additional evidence that they knew what they're doing. It's going to bolster your defense. So always err on the side of getting the release, even if it's not admissible.
Yeah, one other comment is some other members that have been advised by their attorneys, obviously they have big estates, and some of them have actually refused to race if there was a minor out there with them. And we've said, well, the kids have gone through orientation, they've worked their way up, we have their resume, so they're just, they've earned the credibility to go out there and compete. But there are some members that, they've been advised not to be out there with them to, avoid the total risk. So I don't know.
Right. It's participant-to-participant liability. I mean, they have the right to, if I had, you can't convince somebody to do something that they don't want to do, but that's participant-to-participant liability. As long as, if you're following a procedure where your minors are trained and they've been licensed and you've got a whole process to show that they knew what they were doing, I would think your liability is pretty secure.
Some policies, not all.
Yeah, I've also seen too, to the point on the minors, where parents, if you have a single parent or something like that, that can be an issue. Trying to get both parents together and maybe get it notarized in front of a judge. Again, to Lori's point, it's different in every state on how the waiver is going to hold up, but it's another line of an argument should something happen. So.
If I may add something, just something to keep in mind when you're looking at these cases in the liability, you can't do anything to prevent somebody from suing you. It's going to happen, and to prepare for it. What you want to have happen is when the lawsuit comes or when the conflict comes, you've got so much evidence that you did the right thing that when the lawyer on the other side looks at it and they say, it's not worth trying, it's not worth bringing it. But you want to build that. You want to have your processes for signing your releases up to snuff. You want to have your training. You want to have your facility state of the art. You want to make sure your catch fence meets industry standards. You want to make sure your walkways are clear. You want to make sure your maintenance guys aren't walking around and saying, hey, Jeff, somebody's going to trip over that. Yeah, if somebody's going to trip over that, let's fix it before they get here. You really need to be reasonable, and all these things taken together will help you put on that big, strong defense when that lawsuit comes.
Hi. It appears that employee practices law has made its way to mid-level motorsports, so contract labor versus employees. And I understand there's a case on appeal involving volunteers and their definition as contributors to the motorsports business tracks or clubs. Can you speak to employee practices law and the role of volunteers in the confusion?
I'll take that one.
Well, I like volunteers because they don't cost very much, but that's all I'll say.
You're going to have to pay interns now, too. That's true. Did everybody hear the question? The question was really the difference between an employee and an independent contractor. This is heavily litigated. There's a lot of gray areas. The federal wage and hour employers, I can't remember, the federal employers, whatever that group is, the Federal Employers Association, they have a 20-prong test that they use to decide if you're an independent contractor or an employee. Here's the thing. The government wants you to have employees because the government wants you to pay taxes and because it's better for everybody to be employed. So almost everybody's going to lean to the default that you've got an employee. In order to carve somebody out as an independent contractor where you don't have to pay taxes, you've got to meet these 20-prong tests. In some states, there's a 10-prong test. But do they use, and they look at things like, do they use their own equipment? Do they have an independent email address? Do they have other clients? Is what they're doing for you so specialized that it's not a part of your normal business? For instance, if you hire an attorney, he's obviously an independent contractor. You don't practice law, right? You're a racetrack. That would be an independent contractor. So there's a lot of things. And the overriding consideration is control. How much control does Tom have over his volunteers? I'm willing to bet Tom's got a lot of control over his volunteers, even though he doesn't pay them. So the more you control the volunteer, the independent contractor, the more it's going to look like an employee, and the more it's going to go that other way. Here's where this hits you. Let's say you've got an employee, they're on an hourly basis or salary, it doesn't matter. Well, let's say it's an hourly basis, and for whatever reason, they're terminated. And you did everything right. You talked to them, you gave them a lot of chances, but they go home and they're bitter, right? And they're mad. How dare he fire me, or how dare she fire me? I was doing a good job, I showed up. Well, then they go visit their lawyer. Well, there's really no discrimination claim, or it was a bad employee, they should have been terminated anyway, there's no cause of action there. But then the lawyer starts calculating the hours, like, how many hours did you work? I worked 45, I worked 55. How many did they pay you for? Oh, they only paid me for 40. You know, and you didn't pay overtime? That's where they get you. That's where these cases come, where you think you've got an independent contractor, they're defined as an employee, and then you didn't pay them overtime. And then you've got treble damages, and you've got some other penalties. That's where you can really get in trouble. I would advise you to take a really close look at your employees and independent contractors, and even though it's going to cost you a little bit more money to put them on the employee side, if there's any gray area, put them over in the employee. You're going to save yourself a lot of headaches in the long run. Does that help? Yeah, sure.
Workers' comp, too, is by doing them employees, no matter what level you put them at, you're at least extending from the insurance perspective. Jeff would want to talk about workers' comp.
And workers' comp kicks in, sorry, if you have 3 employees, including the owner, you have to have workers' compensation insurance.
Yeah, my experience with workman's comp is even if they're a non-employee, they either have to have workman's comp or you have to be on your policy. One or the other. You're going to pay it either way. So the only thing you really save yourself by making them a non-employee is half the Social Security tax and the unemployment.
What state are you in?
Arizona.
Yeah, every state's a little different.
Yeah, they can have a little different laws, but in Arizona they'll come in and audit your non-employees, and if you can't show a certificate for it, the workman's comp people, you pay workman's comp on the gross that you paid that non-employee. The other thing you were talking about with releases and that kind of a thing, if you have an incident where something has happened, my experience, and I know you didn't bring this up, and if you talked to it, we always did. I did a lot of work in the bar business where we had 25 lawsuits in 11 states going on at any one time, and most of them were nonsense, but we always had incident reports. The reports said who was there, who the witnesses were, what happened, pictures if necessary, all that stuff. And that's one thing that gets missed a lot by people. You do all the things right, the training and the rest, but when something happens, you need your management to step up and give you a detailed written description. That's been my experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, because that's going to help the claims adjuster who's going to get assigned to that right away. I mean, the more information and the quicker they can dissect it, to see the severity, that means a lot, especially if it's a real severe claim. You want to get somebody on that ASAP. So having good management, good notes, good details, it's a big deal. So,
Where is Chris Grainer hiding? Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you're still in here. I lost you.
He's out warming up.
He's out. Great. I told him I wanted him to discuss a topic that we didn't get to during video technology, and of course he left. Anyway, it has to do with keeping up on the regulations that are always being passed by the government. And right now, the biggest one when it comes to video technology is net neutrality. How will different laws and regulations impact these guys and gals in ways that they're not even thinking of? And how often should they almost get a legal advisor update just to keep up with all the changes in laws?
Well, I think often.
At least an hour a week.
At least, for sure, at least an hour a week. I don't know. What I know about net neutrality is what I know from being a consumer. One of the things that struck me from the video presentation earlier is about how much technology is changing. But one of the things that's becoming an increased risk, I think, is we're seeing companies being hacked and databases. And you've got Equifax and you've got Target. And today I flew up from Charlotte, North Carolina. Our county was hacked. And they hijacked, some of the data, and the county's actually thinking about paying $20,000 to the hacker to get their data back, which is ridiculous. A couple of years ago, if you asked me, is it foreseeable that your data is going to get hacked, I'd say, maybe not really. I think in today's day and age, it is absolutely 100% foreseeable that your database is going to be hacked or going to be attempted to be hacked. And so I think some kind of cyber liability insurance is absolutely necessary. I also think if you're gathering payment information and storing credit card information, you've got even increased risk. If those credit cards get out of your possession and control, it's your liability, and you're responsible for that. So I would take any kind of liability with your data, what you're storing, how you're storing it, where you're storing it, is it backed up? And it's funny, we're a law firm. We've actually gone to very old technology for storing our files. After every day, we download all of our files to a hard drive. We disconnect it from our Wi-Fi, and we put it in a fireproof lockbox. Can anybody hack that data? And nobody's going to steal our files. It's a very low-tech solution, but it works. So I just think about your cyber liability and talk to your insurance provider about cyber liability, depending on what you're keeping, is very inexpensive, but it's something that is absolutely foreseeable.
I have a question regarding that. So since there are no laws that have been established or in place for hacking and cybersecurity, how does an insurance company, how are they able to offer a liability insurance program for cyber?
Here's how the lawsuit's going to work is you've got data. Let's say you've got names, credit card numbers, and addresses in your database, and you're storing it, and you've got it on off-site storage. The law is going to say, is it foreseeable that that data is going to be stolen? And I think the answer is yes, it's foreseeable that data will be stolen. You have an obligation to protect that data, and if you don't, you're going to be negligent. And there's your liability, and therefore the insurance company can provide you coverage for that.
Correct, yeah. And we'll, when you're filling out an application for something like that, it'll get into procedures. And also, at least through the programs I've seen that we have, we can get people who are experts in that involved. So if you have questions or maybe a little cheat sheet that details some of that, they'll be able to get that out to you.
I had like 4 years of research of hacking. I have a lot of questions I could ask you. It's a true story. I mean, I have.
Are you saying you've hacked for 4 years? Oh, okay. Oh.
I know how to, though. I mean, it's extremely easy, even with your phones. I've been hacked twice. It happened to me 4 years ago, and then it just recently happened. So, I mean, I know how to go into my own phone and look. And it took me a long time, and I have no IT background. I mean, I've been to the state, state house and so forth, but there are no laws or protections against a regular person. And the typical protocol is go to your local police. So the local police looks at
I think I need to bring you into a meeting because I would love to present you to an underwriter to ask all that because that's really good information. I mean, yeah.
You know, a lot of people thought I was nuts, which I am kind of nuts in a roundabout way. But, you know, when it happens to you, I mean, it was kind of weird. I don't know, almost 6 I got intrigued by it. I was kind of scared because, I mean, I had money taken out of my account, bank, which are called ghost transactions. So I learned about all the terminology, but by the time I learned it and discovered it, it was too late. And the bank looks at you like, we don't know, they don't know what to do. So, you know, I mean, I learned a lot, and, you know, it intrigued me. It intrigued me into the whole hacking cybersecurity world.
Well, guys, we've gotten to that point of the presentation where we're going to wrap things up. But again, I'm going to break the rules because I'm going to ask you the last leading question from a whole different point of view. And we're going to start out with you, Jeff. Why are people in motorsports more fun to work with than any other industry when it comes to insurance?
Because they're fast. So, no, it's motorsports has a unique dynamic compared to other sports, and you know, there's so many divisions, so many different types of racing. You know, oval tracks, drag racing, road course racing, drifting has come on the stage, and I think that's great for the future of motorsports and where it's heading, and it makes it more diverse. And again, meetings like this brings everybody together to share ideas, and maybe an idea can go from one aspect over to another, and you learn and can implement it and make your facility more effective, so and generate more revenue. So we're all in business to try and generate revenue, right? So that's my take on it. I'm excited about the future. Lori has touched on waiver and release a lot today, and gone into digital in the future. I do think that is the route it's going to go in the future. I think obviously the paper waivers are going to continue to go, and there'll be a phasing period over time, but I do see that as being the future.
And please mention the product that you have for the racers that compete at their facilities as well. Tell them a little bit about that.
We've got a product, it's called Competitive Advantage Program, and it's mainly for short tracks, drag racing, but it's $500,000 in coverage with a $15,000 deductible. Most any track that you race at, that speedway, is going to cover that deductible. So it's $217 is the product we sell. It's an annual policy. It doesn't matter how many times you race or where you race at. So we've generated quite a few more members that have joined, especially the last 2 years, and we're continuing to try and grow it. To me, I talk to some of these drivers, and you know, they spend more on a tire than this program costs for the entire year. So when they get a card, they become a member. You put it in your wallet, and you hope you never need it. So thanks.
Lori, again, the same basic question to you, just from the different point of view. Why are people in motorsports so much more fun to work with as a lawyer?
Because we're in the entertainment industry. That's what we do. We get to go play every day. We may think it's a drag because we do it every day, or we get tired because we're traveling all the time and we're in cold weather or something like that. But what we do is the entertainment business. We work nights and weekends and holidays, and we have fun, and we provide entertainment for people. And that's why I absolutely love working in motorsports, meet the most creative, innovative, entrepreneurial people, and that's why it's a lot of fun to work.
Mr. Tom Deary, you've been doing this a long time, but you still look as young as ever. Would you like to hear another lie? No, I'm just kidding you. Tell folks, can you remind people of how great it is to work in this industry?
It is great because, as Lori said, and as Jeff said, and as you all have said, we're in the business of making fun and having fun and making people smile, whether it's when they're sitting behind the wheel going around our club track, or whether they're sitting in the stands or they're in our pits. But I will use all my years of experience to come up with 3 or 4 pieces of sound advice. This is a really smart room because obviously these people are here, and you're all very good people, good businessmen. So you know those rules that have a good insurance agent. And don't ever tell them everything. All right? They're not your wife or your spouse. Tell them everything. Have a great lawyer that understands what we do. Whether it's your business lawyer or any other lawyer, understand what you do, because if somebody doesn't understand this business, you will be more frustrated than not. And then the last thing is have the guy or the person on the gate be the most important person at your racetrack. Because that person on the gate can make everything we do for him, and so you don't need to call her, throw it out the window in 1 second. Have good, sensible people on your gate. And that gate is metaphorical, obviously, for the people that are coming into your facility. Plus, they're the first, as we heard earlier, they're the first point of contact. They're that first touch. That's the person. That's an important person at your facilities, no matter where it is. And with that, thank you for having me up here with these really smart people.
What did we learn from our legal update panel? Well, we learned make sure you are covered for everything that you're allowing to happen on your property, or you're going to be very unhappy. Also, the law is a very complicated thing, and it's ever changing, and the laws are different in different states and in different countries and different local communities. Know your local laws and have a good attorney who also understands the motorsports business. Because the number one thing, whether it's insurance, whether it's legal, whether it's selling hot dogs, have someone that loves your business as much as you. For our legal update group, let's give them a hand.
Thanks, Don.